Okay, so like I was saying earlier, welcome to all the Indian American citizens to election season 2022, and you're going to see a lot of people contesting the elections, which is good because we're going to have a lot of Indian American representatives. Um, Madhu is one of the people that is contesting the elections out in Texas.
Uh,
And yeah, go
Kumar,
ahead, Madhu. Yeah.
I'm not contesting. I'm not contesting an election, but I'm helping to support several of the candidates.
I stand corrected. I stand corrected.
That's okay.
But
No problem. No problem.
so Madhu, my question to you is what separates, before we go there, give us a little background about yourself.
Sure. So I'm a JD MBA. I'm a Texas attorney. I'm licensed both in Texas, but also in the federal courts in the Eastern District of Texas. I have a background in finance before I went into law, and I'm a practicing attorney. I've done a lot of cases such as primarily the civil arena, mass torts, personal injury, medical malpractice, pharma, contracts, things like that. Recently, I've become more involved in defamation law. We have some cases representing, for example, Devin Nunes against MSNBC, Stella Emanuel against CNN, and so we've taken some defamation cases into federal courts.
Right.
But so I'm an attorney with a finance background. In the last 5 or 6 years, I've been more involved, not directly as a candidate, but getting more involved politically. I was a lifelong Democrat all the way back to about 2014, 15.
Oh, you're the other one.
I'm sorry, say it again, Kumar.
You're the other one. I was one, and I guess you're the other one. It
Yes,
doesn't look
yes,
like the
yes.
Democrats have any other support right now.
It was interesting. I came to the U.S. when I was only 4 years old in the early '70s. So I was raised in a very traditional Indian home, Hindu home, and very, best parents I could ever imagine having. So they raised us to appreciate the American dream. But I'm
Right.
also very connected to India. My family home is in India, so I've grown up in a very traditional Hindu home. But my
Right.
father, he instilled in me very early on. He said, we're so blessed. Take the best from both cultures, and he definitely insisted that we were very patriotic. We understood so many things that we have in our favor
Right.
coming here. That's why he came here in the early '70s. So I've lived the American dream, and I've lived in a lot of different places. So
Right.
being a legal immigrant, I have the perspective of, we have it so good. And when I was living in the South, we were living in Alabama back in the '70s. At that time, I was studying the civil rights movement, and I thought mistakenly that the Democrats were the ones that were more in tune with the least well off. I felt like we're so lucky. How are we going to take care of the least well off in our country? So I
Right.
bought that narrative. But especially when I started investigating the Clinton Foundation, which has a lot of links to India also. India is very central to the rise of the Clinton Global Initiative and the Clinton Foundation right after Clinton left office. It
Hmm.
was sort of the key country internationally in many ways. So they built up many allies from India in the Clinton Foundation in a corrupt way. But when I started investigating Clinton Foundation, that's when it struck me that, wait a minute, the Democrats, they don't care. Definitely, they don't care about Indians in India, and they don't care about minorities. They want the votes and power. And I have
Of
my own
course.
criticisms of the GOP as well, but that's a little bit of my background. Yeah, from a
Okay.
personal perspective.
So let me ask you, which candidate are you working with right now?
Just informally, we're especially supporting a lot of the Fort Bend GOP candidates. Like
Okay.
Fort Bend County is a very diverse county just outside Harris County, And in Texas, as you know, they're really focusing on trying to flip Texas from red to blue. And Houston has been really their focus. So they're trying to expand that power base out from Austin, Houston, these cities. They're trying to go out into the suburbs. And Fort Bend is definitely in their crosshairs because it's very diverse, a big Asian population. So we really think that it's a very important county, and it's telling how that goes. If they can find a way to flip or keep Fort Bend very blue, that's going to be a problem in Texas, in places like that.
Got it. Madhu, why the GOP? Why would anyone want to vote the GOP?
Well, I'll go through. I made a whole list of issues, and let me start with. I'm going to start on the negative side, then I'll go to the positive side. So the negative side, let's look at what the Democrats have been responsible for in the last 6 years. Because what they do with the media, it's nonstop, anti-Trump, anti-Republican, certain Republicans. If you're a Republican that basically is in the same camp as the Democrats, you're their hero if you're like Liz Cheney or Romney. But let's talk about some of the things that they avoid. So just in the last 5-6 years, besides the Clinton Foundation, you have Russiagate, spying on a sitting president, using our intelligence agencies to try and frame a sitting president. So Russiagate, Kash Patel has been so central, along with Devin Nunes, in fighting that. The Biden crime family, everything right. they covered up with Hunter Biden on the laptop. And not just that, forget Hunter Biden, it's the corruption of the Biden family. They're compromised by China and other countries because of their corruption. And you're seeing that right now, the after effect. Then I call it the deep state 4-step. I think what the facts have proven is, if you look at the events of 2020, look at what we're dealing with in terms of the level of corruption. And it's both parties, the establishment of both parties. So number one, bioterror. I always ask the question with COVID-19, how is it not bioterror? There's no one that can explain, that can make a good argument that it was not bioterror, because no matter how it originated, it was weaponized. So even if you look at this false premise that originated, say, in the wet market, with the bat, well, they weaponized it because they did not allow the virus to travel within China, within the flights, but they, for weeks, lied to the world, lied to the WHO. The WHO was also lied to, and our own NIH helped cover it all up, but they weaponized it through misinformation, but then also travel. They allowed all these COVID patients to travel outside into Europe, globally. So, carrying the pandemic, carrying the virus all over the world, but not within China. So they weaponized it, including they destroyed all the records. They've hid the origin. So they weaponized it. So this was bioterror. And there are insider threats within the US also that were involved in having it come to fruition. So this was this is Dr. McAuliffe had mentioned this. This was a globalist government operation. It was bioterror. People don't like to say that. It's an uncomfortable thought, but that's what happened. This is bioterror. So that's number one. Number two, domestic terror. BLM, Antifa, what happened in the streets for months with all the destruction, deaths, violence, that happened for months to help increase the chaos right in the face of lockdowns and economic chaos. Then they increased violence and property destruction, small businesses becoming destroyed, large corporations becoming more wealthy, greater income stratification, people becoming, not just losing jobs, but becoming depressed, health concerns, mental health issues. So it's a psychological operation using domestic terror. So that's step number two. Step three, absolute election fraud at an unprecedented level. If you look at the research, our elections have been rigged for many election cycles, even since 2004. But previously, the GOP, with sort of the Bush wing, the establishment, they were involved and they were on the winning side on the presidential, uh, as far as the presidential ticket. So the Democrats were all too willing to call it out, but then they became very quiet when talk of the machines and how compromised they are. Our machines are extremely compromised, and for it's not just ballot manipulation, but it's digital manipulation. And so
Right.
that software has been used internationally to rig elections for a long time, and it's been used in the U.S. So these candidates, besides President Trump, they tried to set the algorithm at about 3%, but he blew the algorithm. The vote was way too much on the day of. And when you look at what's happened in the investigations with True the Vote and 2000 Mules, more and more evidence has come out. Now, including just recently, Bill Barr said that there was no evidence of election fraud, but a U.S. attorney tried to start an investigation and he shut it down. So that's an example of GOP folks also being in on it, because in essence, the deep state has wanted to control ultimately who got in to the Oval Office,
So
because
basically you're
these
saying
insiders.
it's basically what you're saying is that they don't really appreciate outsiders in the
No, they want ultimate control of. They want sort
absolutely.
of the veil of democracy, but the U.S. democracy, it's a mirage. It's something that the U.S. cannot go around the world talking about free and fair elections, because they've lost that moral authority. And so
And yet they do.
this is, yes, exactly. But for example, if you were to ask people in the GOP establishment under oath, are our machines connected to the internet? How many ways are they vulnerable? They won't answer those questions truthfully, because if the people really understood at how rigged the elections have been, it's a game changer. People won't trust these people anymore because they've known about the corruption for a very long time. And there's no way Biden got more legal votes than anyone else in history. What petrified the deep state, these are corrupt insider threats about Trump, is he got more legal votes than anyone in history, millions of more votes than Obama even. So and plus they can't control him. So, and he came after both parties. So he's a mortal threat to this globalist cabal. So that was step 3 of the deep state 4 step, the election fraud. So it's cumulative. You can remember back in 2020 how this became sort of a growing problem, in our country, where you just saw one thing after another kind of contribute to the chaos. So then election
Right.
fraud. Then step 4 was January 6th. It was absolutely a staged operation. And it wasn't just turning down the 20,000 National Guard that Trump requested, but there were scores of FBI operatives and FBI informants wearing MAGA gear. They were right at the forefront of the violence. So they staged it. And they thought that would be sort of the death blow to the MAGA movement, is to, kind of paint all Trump supporters as insurrectionists. So we've seen all of that from the corrupt elements of the GOP, people like McConnell, people like Karl Rove, all these anti-Trump folks that would actually prefer that Biden win, not Trump. That's very telling, that
And
they
that's kind of
prefer Biden
surprising.
over Trump.
That's kind of
If
surprising and shocking. Wouldn't you agree? I mean, given that
Yeah,
it's supposed to be, well, at least in my naive thought process, it's supposed to be the party, not the person. And in this
that's
case,
right.
if Trump was representing the Republican Party, Mitch
Well,
McConnell, for whatever his thought process was, he should have at least gone with the party rather than back
yeah.
a person.
Well, why are they so fearful of people leaders, nationalist leaders like Trump and Prime Minister Modi? They want to return power back to their populace, people, away from a central bureaucracy, away from DC, away from the globalists. And that's what they absolutely cannot stand. Trump returning power back to the people, also informing the people about how corrupt both parties have been, how compromised they've been with the CCP, and the border crisis. The GOP was never doing anything about the border crisis before President Trump started raising these issues. There were plenty of business owners that were all too happy to take the cheap labor. And so these people literally have sold out the country for their own agenda, for their own power. So if you're, say, a military contractor who's making hundreds of millions of dollars off the military industrial complex, and here comes along somebody like Trump saying that we don't want these wars, we're going to look at every line item of the DoD. These kinds of things are, you're shifting trillions and trillions of dollars away from the cabal and exposing it. And you're questioning all of it, and you're waking up people globally. And so Trump, he's a global figure. He's pointing out, and you see it in Italy and in Europe, how he's a very popular figure. So he's such a dangerous threat. So they had to go to this deep state force step. So those are some, I would say, negative reasons. Some, they're so corrupt, and Biden and Obama and Clinton's, these people could not get away with this sort of corruption had it not been for a very willing GOP that's willing to go along with it. They're working hand in hand as a uniparty. They couldn't do it just as one party with another party fighting them so much. But besides that, if you look at the issues, why I think we should be, as Indian Americans, be supporting a patriotic GOP, not the old GOP that's corrupt and establishment and uniparty, and is in essence the flip side of the Democrat Party. There's, they act like they're arguing and fighting, but when it comes right down to it, in the back room, they're for the same things. That's why look at President Bush. He's right with Biden and Obama and Clinton. They're all buddies against President Trump. So then look at the issues. So the economy. Look at President Trump and the economic situation, how bad it is with inflation and overspending and government spending. So economic issues, job creation, good jobs, not just low paying jobs. Look at the quality of jobs, and across all demographics, including Blacks, Hispanics, all demographics, Asians, whites. Now, Indian Americans are very important. They have the highest per capita income of any group in the United States. They also have the highest education level. We do not depend on government handouts at all. We're the polar opposite of a group like that.
And thank you for bringing up the issue of the Indian Americans. Yeah. I hate cutting you off, but I need to bring this up.
No, go ahead.
You're right. Indian Americans are probably the highest per capita income within the US, and they're probably the highest educated also. But with that, we're also seeing a lot of anti-India movements, and I'm going to bring this case up, and I want to find out what your thoughts are. Recently, in my neck of the woods, a small town called Teaneck, and I'm not sure if you've heard about it.
I heard. I was just reading about this, Kumar. Yes.
Right. Teaneck Democratic Unit has, called on the FBI and all the other investigating agencies to start looking into the VHP, the Vishwa Hindu Parishad, America, and I think a few other organizations, to see where the funds are coming from. Surprising that they're not, and I shouldn't be bringing this up, but it's surprising that the TDU, the Teaneck Democratic Unit, has not asked for the same kind of investigation into the IAMC, the Indian American Muslim Council, or for that matter, other organizations. It's just the VHP and the others. what is it that the GOP, which you are now representing in this roundtable, what is it that you think the GOP could do to better this kind of a situation?
Sure. I think you have to start with China and you have to look at alliances. So China has been instrumental for the globalist cabal in not just the cabal has made the CCP rich, but then they've used China to sow division internationally. I'll give you an example. Pakistan. China is very involved in Pakistan and supporting terror, not just in Kashmir. They support Pakistan and they sow division between Pakistan and India. India is a big rival
Hold on
of
for a
China
second.
in
Hold
that
on.
region. Sure.
Hold on
Sure.
for a second. Are you saying that the Chinese have some kind of part in a small township in New Jersey called Teaneck? If you didn't
Well,
know New Jersey, you'd have to look it up to find out where exactly
sure.
this small town is.
In an indirect way, they do, because what they want to do is they want to weaken support for the nationalist Indian government, the Modi regime, which
Right.
has, India has not just the nuclear weapon, but they're ascendant with the Modi regime. But they're also, India first. They're very focused on increasing their economic strength, military strength. They're also anti-China. So they want to weaken India. They feel like sowing division within India by, just like in the US, when you have division, it creates an opportunity. So it weakens India by weakening support from the Indian government. So in the region, yeah, it's China and India are the big rivals, internationally. And so the globalists and these insider threats in the US, they've been very aligned with China and they do the bidding of China. So just like China has so much control in academia, they have so much control in DC, so much influence. So they are pushing anti-Indian policy. When I say anti-Indian policy, I mean policies that tend to cause discord, division between Muslims and Hindus. Absolutely, they would do that.
So
Just like
what?
Facebook has been involved in
Oh
sowing
yeah.
division between these ethnic groups in India. And they use these algorithms via big tech to create division. But I'm just saying that China is so central to the globalist cabal and the deep state that you take away Chinese sort of like the black hat, their money, their military, their economic clout, their trade, the way they handle trade and weaken countries, the way they create debt crises, things like that globally. So they use China as a bad actor to ply their trade and further their globalist agenda. Now, if you have India as being an offset to China, what's going to happen? This is what Trump was onto. This is why it's such a big threat. Trump saw that India could be such a great ally of the US. You saw that great relationship he had with
Right.
Modi. And so that is such a threat to the global cabal, which is so aligned with China and the CCP and communism. They love this idea of communism, where you have power very centralized with the few. They are so enamored by that. They love that idea.
So
The
my
polar
question to you
opposite of
this, Madhu.
populism. Yeah.
See, my question to you is this, Madhu. You're right about the love for the Chinese. I've seen that, but
Yeah.
and you probably have more information about what has happened in Seattle a couple of years ago when the I think it was anti-Modi, I forget. Uh, See, the Seattle City Council passed some resolutions against Modi and India, and then you had the
Right.
same thing happen in other cities within the U.S. What is it the GOP could do
The
to?
GOP, yes. Yes. The GOP has to do a much better job of reaching out to the Indian American community.
Absolutely, I
They're
completely agree with that.
absolutely, they're not doing any of it. And like you've touched upon, At the same time, while I think, you know, let's be frank, 80% plus of Indian Americans vote Democrat. I think that might be
I call
changing
them the
somewhat.
confused. I call them the
Yeah,
confused
yeah,
voter.
right.
The Indian Americans are the most confused voter. I was talking to a friend of mine
Yeah.
this morning, and I happened to mention the same thing. I said Indian Americans are probably the most confused people. They want certain benefits that the Democrats give you, and then certain benefits that the Republicans give you.
But
And
Kumar,
yeah, go ahead.
here's an example. I just wanted to mention this. Think about it. The Democrats, what do? Not now the GOP, they're just sort of, they haven't really looked at the Indian American community as an opportunity. I think that's changing. I think that they realize, especially with the growing numbers and the China threat, some of these talking points I'm talking about, I think they see the opportunity. But the Democrats, what they've done is they have the support of Indian Americans, but they don't do anything in return, and quite the opposite. So many Indian American students are so good, they can get into the best colleges, and they're actively discriminated against. Asians are
Absolutely.
discriminated against in the admissions process. And the whole, with CRT and the curriculum in colleges, which is basically American Marxism. It's they're definitely not pro-Hindu. They're not pro-faith. They're not pro-India, and they are discriminated against. And we don't believe in
But
discriminating against anyone, whites, Asians, anyone. So what they're actually getting dinged in the process. They're not even, yeah.
you're being very diplomatic. I would have said, I would have used some of the word, but I'm going to leave it. I'm going
Hmm.
to leave it at that.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
question I have for you, see, you just brought up a point that the Indian American citizens, students, not citizens, the students are getting dinged. But in order to avoid such dinging, if there's a word called dinging, in an effort to avoid this dinging, what exactly would the Indian American have to do? Because here's my problem. I came in here as a student. Okay,
Hmm.
went through my college, did everything, and then as soon as I realized there was the two-party process, the first thing I realized was, oh, okay, and naivety. Immediately you realize Democrats, they stand, they're friendly people, they're good people, they're pro-India,
Pro-immigrant,
pro-immigrant,
or
absolutely.
yes.
And then you have, the Republican side, which looked very standoffish. They didn't, at least, the picture that was painted to us was
Right.
they're not very open as far as colored people go.
Yeah. It seemed like it was only for white and Christian
Absolutely.
in
And
general.
then, when when a student comes in and starts his or her education, and then you get into the workforce and you start working, and you start realizing there are certain boundaries that you don't cross on either side of the aisle, and I'm talking about the Senate or the Congress
House,
for that
House,
matter.
uh-huh.
Yeah, the House of
Yeah.
I would say Congress. The point is, as soon as you have these boundaries and we start realizing it, only then can we start maximizing our effect on
I think,
these two
yeah.
parties. But we haven't done that.
I think we have to be much more bold and assertive and self-confident. A lot of Democrats, they still play into this whole narrative of we're the victims, we're being discriminated against, white folks, this and that. It's absolute nonsense. How can this country be a racist country that's full of discrimination if Indian Americans are doing this well? How? How
Mhm.
is that possible? And how have they had to rely on the government? How has the government helped them do any of it? They've had to work and earn everything despite the discrimination against them that's being plied by the leftists, especially within academia. Like for example, it's a different time, but I remember in the 70s, my father, he was a physicist. So he was a scientist. He's around all other white folks. And a lot of these white folks are Democrats, leftists, but guess what? They didn't like, here's this Indian doing really well. They're not used to, maybe having somebody that's not white in that circle. And they thought, oh, well, you should go back to India. So, this isn't
Oh
something
yeah.
exclusive to GOP or, Republicans. There is that sort of discrimination. But you do it through the US rewards performance and what you can contribute to the economy. If you can bring something to the table, you will be rewarded for it. And by and large, there is not discrimination. It's very few people. You have it in every group, including Indians. And so we should stamp it out when it's there. And but we should be very self-confident. We're not victims. We're soaring. We're living the American dream. And we should be very vocal about it. We should talk about the things that allowed us to succeed, things like family values, listening to our parents, following the law, studying our butts off, working very hard, following the law, not looking for the government, starting our own businesses. So many affluent business owners. Think about all the small businesses that lost everything during these crazy lockdowns. Anti-small business. They're all those small businesses that why? Because they love the big corporations. They love the income stratification. That's what they wanted. Small business owners are also what? They will tend to be more conservative because they're very wary of government interference, and they tend to be independent. And we also saw with the lockdowns how they used corporations to exercise control over the population by pushing corporate policies, things like vaccine mandates and things like that to control behavior. So if you don't work for a big corporation that they have influence over, they don't have that kind of direct control over you. I think it's another reason why they subvert faith. They don't want us always going to the temple and being of faith and being devout Hindus. Because if you believe in God and family, then you don't pray to government, right? You don't bow to government. That's what they ultimately want. That's why God is such a threat to communism. So just some other issues, Kumar. So, energy policy, being energy dependent. Look at Ukraine and Russia and how much, the warmongering and the military industrial complex. It was Trump that was talking about no endless wars and drawing and recasting ourselves peace through strength, no endless wars. Look at ISIS in the Middle East. Under the Obama administration, the kind of chaos that was created. Even the Iraq war, which Trump said was needless. We should have focused on 9/11, on ISIS, Al-Qaeda and bin Laden, and not, started this war in Iraq. But the whole military industrial complex, it's the Democrats and the establishment that's itching for war again, right? Look at schools, school curriculum, CRT, LGBTQ, the curriculum. So get back to teaching the basics in schools. We want good educations for a good education for our children. Get back to that, not pushing a Marxist agenda, and it's one thing to not discriminate against, say, somebody of the LGBTQ community, but don't sexualize children, things like that. Don't try to turn men into women, women into men, right? We come from traditional families. We know the value of a strong father and mother. We've lived that, most all of us. That's why we are so successful. We have very good mothers and fathers that we listen to. It's not some magic formula. COVID, the lockdowns, and all the economic destruction. I talked about college admissions and how it's anti-Asian. Look at border security. We're legal immigrants. We don't want illegal immigrants, not just because it's wrong, because it's causing so much chaos and subverting our society. We can't afford not just the crime, but economically to support all these people. We talked about China and India and how the Democrats are so pro-Pakistan, pro-China, and very critical of India on the global stage. You see it all the time. Peace through strength, subversion of religion. So many of us, whether we're Hindu, Muslim, or Christian, where faith is very important to us. And I think the GOP does a much better job of respecting faith. You saw that with the lockdowns, the nonsense of not wanting people to attend church and temple. Again, this is also a psychological operation to depress people and get them weakened mentally. What else? College curriculum. They're pushing Marxism left and right. I went to UT Austin, and I was shocked. Now I'm hearing that you have professors outright saying on the very first class day, "Hey, I'm communist. If you don't like it, get another professor." So, like with the Confucius Institutes, these organizations emanating from the CCP that had the tentacles all through academia and influencing curriculum. That's from China. They're anti-free speech, definitely pro-communism, pro-Marxism. We've seen the ravages of communism and Marxism in India. We've lived it firsthand. Look at the Soviet Union and how that fell. We want a constitutional republic. We want democracy. We want fair capitalism. Yeah.
See, and yet I'm seeing a lot of. You just brought up the Soviet Union. We saw the destruction that happened within the USSR once it broke, and how I think they're still reeling under that after the economic debacle with the USSR. But having said that, don't you think it's kind of, I won't use the word amusing, more shocking that you're seeing a lot of the rising Democrats who are going toward or leaning towards socialism? That to me is
it's
shocking.
Really amazing. It is shocking. It is shocking. And they're brainwashed. See, to gain power, they see the writing on the wall. And Trump's election and his continued strength, which has actually only increased being out of office, it mortifies them because they see, wait a minute, we're on the losing end of this. We're going to be voted out. They're in the majority. So how do we hold on to power? So in essence, you have to tear everything down and start from scratch and create a new system. This is just like the Bolshevik revolution. What do they do? They tear up everything and they throw out everyone. And then once they get into power, they cement power around themselves. This is the same thing that happened in China, but you see it with taking down all the statues and attacking the history of America, and how basically America is inherently flawed, and we should repent and change everything from the Electoral College to the Supreme Court. Everything is in flux, right? And everything can be attacked. The foundation of all the foundations of society, they can be attacked, so they can place themselves in power.
So my question to you, Madhu, is
created.
this. Yeah. My question to you is this, Madhu. It's very interesting what you just said, but it's always a matter of, and it's not just because we are here in the U.S. Anywhere you go, what's in it for me? What is it the Indian American population would gain from the GOP? I'm talking about specifically the Indian American population.
I just think that if we are to continue living the American dream, to have the opportunities that Indian Americans had starting the 60s, maybe even a little earlier, 60s, 70s, where they were able to work hard and do anything, start their own business, go into any field and be independent, be self-sufficient, and be free and live anywhere. That is not going to be there for their children, maybe in 10, 20 years, on this track that we're going down. They do not want sort of the star performers. They don't want people that are autonomous, extremely hardworking, independent, intelligent, not government dependent. They want people that are weakened and they work just enough to just kind of pay the taxes and just kind of fund their corrupt operations. That's what they need the U.S. to do that. And that they had it in place for decades. Then all of a sudden, these things started being exposed, especially when Trump started talking about how corrupt the media is. And along with China and the border, those were some things that, really started this snowball because it started exposing
and that's kind of
both parties.
that's kind of scary, Madhu. I mean, what you just said about treating people the way they would treat cattle, basically. I think you didn't say that, but that's what I'm
Yeah,
assuming you meant. Um,
absolutely.
if that's the case, then in 20, 30 years, you're not really going to see literate educate. And when I say literate, I'm not talking about the college, the college degree that's handed out to you. I'm talking about the person that can actually come in and make a coherent sentence without having to look it up in the thesaurus or the dictionary.
Well, that's
Because
another
that's what
thing.
we're
Yeah,
coming to right now. That's about what
yeah.
we're coming to right now. A person can't write one decent sentence.
Kumar, that's another thing that I think as an Indian American in the Indian American community, we should be cognizant of because we're so strong in the tech field realm and IT.
Exactly.
But we should not, our community should not be sort of there to help perpetuate this global cabal and big data takeover of the world as well. Because what we've seen is as people, our EQs and IQs are dropping, largely because of technology, also our dependence on computers and being brain hacked in essence. And it shapes our thinking neurologically, but also shapes opinion. And you've seen that, especially with COVID, when everyone was on their phone, you saw this mass psychosis. It wasn't by accident, right? It's through propaganda. And what are the tools of propaganda? Computers and phones. So I think another thing that our community should be cognizant of is use technology to be productive, to be good citizens, to learn, to work well, maybe not take as much time, to work smart, not so hard, but go back to God, nature, and face-to-face communication and being in person, communicating in person, writing on paper, reading books. I think you're going to see a large segment of the population because instinctually also we know a lot of these things are unhealthy for us mentally and physically. And these big corporations, Amazon, Intel, Facebook, all these companies, Twitter, not just social media, but Microsoft and all these companies, they have a huge agenda and they're used by government to basically further its propaganda. These same companies built out the big brother state in China. They use the same algorithms in the US. Is our media really that different than the media in China? Think about it. The
You got a
level of
point.
lies and I don't really think they are. So I recently, just an aside, I heard a whistleblower. His name is Don Luters, and there's an Epoch Times article back in 2018 about this. But in 2008, Microsoft, they entered into basically a de facto agreement with the Obama administration. Microsoft has all the contracts throughout our government. And so they control all the data management. And so they basically create chaos and hide the data, the documentation about the government. So they're agents of basically the cover up. So Microsoft is used to cover up the crimes of the federal government, because they have licenses for all the departments, all the government agencies. And so, like, for example, when you do a FOIA request, you're not getting, they're not going to incriminate themselves with and give you all the paperwork.
Right.
But I think that's something that maybe India, I think we need to return. If you think about our philosophy as Hindu philosophy, and so many great thinkers from India. India was the most affluent country on the planet before the British came in and took everything over a few centuries. But I think intellectually and spiritually, I think Indians, we can contribute to mental well-being and physical well-being, and learn. And even though we're so good at IT, get back to nature, personal contact, faith, and these things, that our parents knew so well.
So basically what you're saying is get out of the back office and start looking at nature.
Yeah, get out in nature, God's creation. Get in front of people. We need to become better in interpersonally. A lot of, I think Indian Americans maybe they spend too much time behind the screen. You have to get in front of people, talk with people face to face, and get very comfortable being around people, press the flesh, shake hands, get more involved politically, get more, show up to school board meetings and get out there, because they've kind of taken Indian Americans for granted. They make money, they pay the taxes, they're comfortably in the Democratic camp. They're not going to raise any, criticisms, ask tough questions. They're not going to get involved.
And that's a problem that I see as a major problem. Yes, you're right. I think we have a couple of people online.
Sure.
I see a gentleman by the name of Partha.
Hi, Partha.
Partha, are you there? Can you unmute yourself, Partha?
Yes.
Go ahead. Do you have a question for Madhu?
Hi, Partha.
Well, the first thing is, as you asked about what the GOP could do for getting Indian people into their fold. First thing, GOP has to get out of the mindset that they can only survive with Christians. They cannot.
I agree with that.
Following to exploit the Indian people, and like they did the Muslims, same way the people, they will flock into there. So that mindset has to be changed. First of all, that's what will be preached. You cannot survive another election after this when you just stay on one focus, because that's a problem we see, as you Madhu see it, right? So that
I agree. Yes,
has to be changed. It's a people's party, not one religion party.
I think that's true, Partha.
Exploited by the Muslims. The way they do, they collect the money into their, mosques and all, and they support the people. You support us, we'll give you the money. So they come in there. They support.
Right.
So we are trying to do as if right now, collect money and give it to the people who are trying to come into election and do. You win, we give you the money, but you support us. You have to understand that Constitution protects everybody's religious right, not only for the Christians. Correct?
No, you're right.
Told right away, straight on their face now. Slowly to be injected on people's mind that you cannot survive another time when there's an onslaught comes. You have to survive with everybody, not one. So all religion stay out. Only I see this in the Bible Belt, we call it. See, I lived in New York for 25 years. I know. In Bible Belt to the south, we used to call, oh, there's a Bible Belt. In Chicago, oh, Bible Belt says this, say that, say that.
Mm-hmm.
But here in south, right from Carolina and down here, all the way to Arizona, they talk about only Christians. That's not the part of the country we can survive with. Has to be all over. And people in the larger cities, like if you go to the heartland of Texas, like Marfa, like all those areas, you see the real Texas, real Texans. But that's the people who can really stand up and fight. I understand that 100%. And they are simple, and they will straight right on your face. If they like it, they'll take you. I've been to many small villages in Nebraska, in Iowa. I traveled all over and I saw. But you can talk to them, they understand it. Somebody has to start talking, telling the contenders, come on, you cannot survive another election basing on all what you were doing now. Take everybody together, that's the power. That's one thing. Second thing is, yes, we have to also.
Partha, we've got other people. Partha, we've got a time limit. About 1 hour. I think the show is for 1 hour. I have other people waiting. But
Yes.
thank you. I think we understand what you're trying to say.
Thank you, Partha.
Thank you, Partha.
Thank you, Partha.
Thank you.
Hi, Veera. Veera. Going once, going twice. Moving on. Vijay. Hi, Vijay. Can you hear us?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Hi,
I
Vijay.
can. Go
Okay,
ahead.
hi. Actually, I find this discussion very fascinating. Naturally, as immigrants, and especially as we come to this country and work within the system, and the US is very unique in the world. That's why everybody wants to come here, where, like you mentioned previously, that we are rewarded for the hard work that we put in. And it is, the limited government and regulation that basically makes people thrive.
Yeah.
And, which is a natural Republican Party stand. But yet, even people, and I'm not from India, but even people coming from India who have experienced big government and interference in their daily lives with regulation, they still go and support the same policies that they ran away from, which I find very sort of odd and, against everything that they've come here for.
Yeah.
And I find that frustrating, because these are educated people who have basically done well in this country, and yet they still go against the same policies that made them so successful. And I'm so glad that I was able to join this. I joined a little bit late, but I thank you for hosting this.
Right. That's right,
Thank you,
Vijay. It's very interesting. It's very interesting you said that, because this is the same thing that my father used to say when I was growing up. Because we would be at these functions with our family friends, and some of our family friends. So my father was a scientist, so they were physicians, and they were doing well financially, and criticizing the U.S. left and right about this is not fair. And then my father would say, "How you're doing so well in this country? There's no way you could have been doing this well in India or anywhere else. So why are you here if it's so bad?" So he would say that. And so maybe I think a part of it is like socialism. They always say, well, they did it wrong in other places. We can do it better. They just haven't done it right. So maybe I think there's definitely cognitive dissonance. Like you say, they support these policies that they've fled, but somehow I think they get tricked into thinking, well, this time they're going to do it better, or it's somehow better here in the U.S. Their plan.
I think it's a hope. It's a hope that they live on. Thank you, Vijay.
Actually, one more point. I'm also seeing that within the U.S. I live in Florida, and we see a lot of people moving down to Florida from New York and Michigan and all these blue states, and the same thing is happening. They're coming here for a reason, and yet they're voting blue because, despite leaving the blue states, and that's the other thing within the U.S. So anyway, thank you very much. I'm taking more time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey, Anushka, how are you? Anushka, you're muted. Anushka. Okay. Um, I guess we're running out of time.
Okay,
Unless Vera
sure.
or Anushka have, I think they're having some connectivity issues. Vera, are
Hi,
you there?
this is
Yeah.
Veera. Thanks, Madhu, for a nice talk.
Hello.
Thank you, Sridhar. So,
Hi, Vera.
the topics you covered are very profound, unless kind of someone takes the time to kind of see really what's happening. It's on the surface, it's for us normal citizens, it's it's not black and white. So thank you for educating. So so what there's a, like you said, there's a lot of confusion among Indian Americans, and how do we kind of go from here? Kind of what's happening, and the mainstream media is always take sides, kind of left
First of
or
all, let's not even go into the media because you're going to have me start
okay.
cursing the media out. But that being said, Vera, sorry, I called you
Yeah,
Vijay.
that's fine.
Vera,
Yeah, I know we are short of
the
time.
thing
Yeah.
is, the thing is, where Madhu did kind of elaborately talk about what is expected from, or not what is expected, what we should do as Indian Americans. He did talk about it. If you just, once we're done, and once it's out in the open, this discussion is out in the open, you'll probably see you'll see the video, and when you do see the video, you're going to see Madhu has talked about how to address that situation primarily. And I'm going to I'm going to summarize it. We have to start asserting ourselves.
Absolutely.
We cannot be just construed as back office personnel. You sit in the
Correct.
back, you get your work done, and then you go home. That's not going to work. You have to start asserting
That's
yourself.
right.
And unfortunately, Indian American population is not a very assertive population. You don't see too many of us getting together. And even when we had these protests up in New York, we didn't
Mhm.
see too many Indian American people there. You did see a lot of white people show up
Mm.
for Indian issues, but I
Mm.
didn't see too many Indian people show up. And that shows you how much we really care about what is happening to our community. It's not just happening in the US, it's happening
Mhm.
directly to our community, and we really don't get involved in that. It's,
Mhm.
I don't want to go into that because that, and if you read any of my articles that I've written, you'll see I keep harping about this. Anyway, thank you, Vera. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Vera.
Uh,
Thank you.
Anushka, are you on? I'm going once, going twice,
Mhm.
gone. Madhu, thank you so much for taking the time to
Thank
talk
you,
to us.
Kumar.
It was
Thank you.
awesome. And
Thank
I'll
you.
be
Great
reading.
job. Thank you, Kumar.
Thank you.
Thank
Take
Thank
you.
care,
you.
all of
God
you.
bless.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Okay. Good night. Good night. Thank